Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar by Phrase. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Clara. I am an event specialist here at Phrase, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the introduction to phrase strings. Before we dive into today's topic, I would like to invite you to join us at Slido, which is a platform where we will collect your feedback. So please, if you can, join us there either by scanning the QR code that you can see on the screen, or you can just simply open a new tab in your browser and go to slido.com and insert the event code STR101 as for strings 101. Or I will in a second drop a link, direct link to the chat. So you will be able to join via that. Let me do that quickly. There you go. And once you join Slido, you should be able to see two tabs. One is for submitting your questions, which we will address at the end. And then in the other tab, there are some polls. So if you want to, you can let us know once where you are joining us from. And secondly, what brings you here. If you are a completely new user of phrase strings, or if you are looking for a refresher to your knowledge, or maybe you are at the phase of thinking to start to use phrase strings. So let us know. And while you are doing that, let me introduce the speaker for today. We have Deepan Patel. He is our lead solution architect for EMEA. Hi, Deepan, how are you?
Very well, thanks, Clara. Very excited to be leading this product tour. It's been a while, right, since we've done one of these events.
Yeah, it's been a while. Excited to have this format back, and thank you for doing the demo for us today. So Deepan will give you the tour of phrase strings. And at the end of the session, we will answer, or he will answer your questions that you can enter into Slido. And one last thing from me, I want to mention that this webinar is being recorded and we will be distributing the recording automatically to everyone tomorrow. So just in case you need to rewatch, you will have the chance. So I will now stop sharing my screen and over to you, Deepan, and everyone enjoy the webinar.
Thank you very much, Clara. So I'll just start by sharing my screen. And also I'm going to turn off my camera as well, just to ensure that I have sufficient bandwidth. Yep, thank you very much, everyone, for joining this webinar today. It's been a while since we've done one of these product tours. So I'm very excited to be leading the product tour for phrase strings today, and especially to highlight some of the new features and functionalities that we've been incorporating as part of our recent releases for the phrase strings project. So what we're taking a look at the moment is the phrase strings application, which is part of our product suite. So you're probably familiar with the fact that we have phrase strings and phrase TMS, which form part of the phrase product suite. Now, phrase strings is our strings repository solution for our customers. So it's typically used by our customer base as their source of truth to manage any key value-based content for mobile and web-based applications. So at the moment, we're looking at phrase strings, and you can see that I've got a couple of projects which I've set up here in this particular space. Spaces you can kind of think of as a folder structure in a way in which you can organize your projects as you see fit. And the first thing that I want to do as part of this demonstration is show you how simple it is to create a project. So I'm just going to be doing this in my particular demo space here. I'll just go through the process now of creating a new project. So the first thing you need to do is give it a title. And this is May 2023. Then you specify a main or the main file format, right, which you'll be ingesting into your phrase strings project. So this will then just influence some default choices when it comes to uploading content, but it doesn't really matter. You can still upload content in different file formats which are supported by the platform. It's just that this will be the default choice when you're looking to upload any content. And here then you can specify a main technology which is relevant then for your application. So if we click on save now, then we're just going to be taken to the next part of the project creation wizard. And here now we're invited then to set up some locales for our project. So our default locale, I will say that it's English for United States in this case, and we'll be localizing for the German and French markets. You can see here, right, that we support a variety of regional variations, so locale codes, right? So in case that you want to be very specific with the regionalization of languages, then of course you can make use of all the supported language codes that we have here. And so I'm just going to create these languages now. Now, at this point, you have the ability, right, to upload a file to the project. Before I do that, I just want to configure some settings which will be relevant for this particular project. So I'm just going to skip the setup now. And here, then you can see that we're taken to our default project dashboard here with various items, tabs here, which we can take a look at a bit later. The first thing that I want to do is just enable a setting which relates to pre-translation, because I want to make use of translation memory and machine translation in this project. I don't want to, at this point in time, translate any new keys which are imported automatically, because I want to show how linguists can then interact with the platform. But enabling pre-translation allows us then to perform some batch actions related to pre-translation once we're working in the translation editor. So I'm just going to click on save. And at this point now, I'm just going to upload a file to the project. So I'm just navigated to the languages tab. And here you can see I've got this button for upload file. Here, because I've defined the main file format of this project as simple JSON, it's automatically then just added it here. But of course, I can modify this in case the file format that I'm uploading is different. I'm going to now select the file, which is this en.json file, and make sure to specify that this should be imported for the locale English United States. I can also add tags, right, to any uploads that I am creating in the platform. And this will be useful then as a filtering mechanism a bit later in the project. So what we can do now is just proceed with importing the file. You're basically presented then with some statistics, right, in terms of the number of keys that have been created, tags which have been created, and translation. So now if we navigate then back to our languages tab, you can see that there's been some movement. We've ingested some keys into this project. By default, then the English values are set as translated, but we have some work to perform in terms of translation for German and French. But before we initiate the translation process, I want to just highlight some key management tasks which can be performed before initiating the translation process. And these are really geared towards providing your translators with specific context, right? So visual context, for example, in the form of screenshots, or we can add character limits as well to the keys to ensure that translations don't exceed a particular character limitation that we've set on the key level. And we can also, as you can see here, have the ability to add descriptions to keys as well to help the translators make informed choices when it comes to performing the translations in the tool. Just adding a description here. And now this description has been applied to this particular tag. Now, what we've released in recent times is the ability then to perform batch actions on keys within the translation editor. So if I then select all the keys here, you can see that we've got this little pop-up which displays here. And now what I can do is, attach screenshots, add a Figma preview, for example. So I'm actually going to go through the process of adding a screenshot, but only with a selection of keys which are relevant. So let's just select these 3 keys here. And what I'm going to do is now associate a particular screenshot with these 3 keys. So I can navigate to my machine here, select the screenshot. You can see now that we've got a screenshot, right, which has now been applied and is visible for translators directly within the editor interface. We can then navigate to the next key. You can see that this batch action now has added this and associated this screenshot with the particular keys that I've which I selected then when uploading the screenshot. Now, in addition to these static screenshots, which you can add to the project, we also have the ability to provide a link to a Figma file, for example, which contains these keys and visuals for these particular keys that we're localizing. So once again, I'm just going to select a few keys here. And under my batch actions, I'm going to add the Figma preview. Now here, you're invited then to paste a link. So I'm just going to navigate to my Figma file right now. And here, I'm just going to then select, actually just this page in my design. I can copy the link I now navigate back to the strings editor, adding the link, you can hopefully see in a moment that we now have access directly to the Figma file, which linguists can then sort of take a look at whilst they're working in the editor. And the advantage here is that in case there are any sort of layout changes or some slight design changes which are made in the Figma design itself, then these will be visualized directly for translators in the editor. This is a live preview so that they can see any changes which are made in the Figma design in this preview functionality here. And so, yeah, they have absolutely all available access, right, to the design in its current form. Now, I mentioned the fact that we want to perform some translation work, right, for this particular project. And for this, we need to add users then to our project. Now, you can either do this via the actual project interface itself. So here I have the ability to add users to my project, or you can go to the users area here. And if you're adding a new user, you would just type in their email address. So I'll just add an alias for myself. And what you'll notice here is that we have the ability then to define a certain role profile for this user. So you can see here that we support 5 out of the box user profiles here. In this case, I want to invite this person as a translator user to my instance. So I select linguist, and now I have some additional customization options in terms of access rights, which I can grant to this particular user. So I can define whether they should have access to all my languages in my system or only for a particular set of languages. So I can do that here. And I can also specify here which spaces or projects they should have access to. So I can really control the degree of access that users have to particular resources, languages, or projects within the instance. So what I'm going to do now is we can sort of invite the users. So I'm going to select all languages. For now, I'll just give them access to this last project that I have. So this is that. Now, of course, this person will now need to set up their own user credentials, right? I have a login and password for the instance. So I'm not going to go through that process now in the interest of time efficiency. But once users are then added or incorporated into your instance, we can then proceed to add members, right, to any users that we have in the platform. So I can search for all users that we have here. So you can see some variations of my name, which I've just added here. So you can add individual members to a particular project, or you can configure teams as well. So a set of users who belong in a team. And once those are configured, you can then invite these people as well. And so they will have then access to this particular project and be able to work on it. Now, I just want to highlight some aspects then of how a linguist works then in the translation editor. So once they're done, or before you actually do that, you can create a job for them. This will create an assignment where you can then select the keys which you want to include in this particular translation job. So I'm just selecting the keys now, define the languages. Won't need English United States in this case, but here then I can specify, right, which user should be part of, who should be assigned to these languages. So I've got a couple of translators now who are assigned to the respective languages. And now what I can also do is save this particular job as a template, either as a project-based template or as a global organization template. So I'll just select the project template now, and we'll just give it a name. And before I submit all of this, I just want to highlight some additional features in that you can specify due dates or deadlines for when the job should be completed. You can then also add briefing information. So please, for example, follow the term base in the project. And in case you want to have no job-related notifications posted, for example, to a Jira ticket, for example, you can paste the URL of this Jira ticket there, and any job-related notifications, so comments or the changes of status for the job, will then be pushed to that Jira ticket as well, so that any people who are not necessarily working within phrase strings can receive notifications on the relative on certain aspects related to the jobs. So I'm just going to click on continue now. And then in order for the notifications to be sent out to the linguist, you click on start job. They will receive a notification by email with the URL to the project. And so that once they're logged in, this is what they'll be able to see. And then they can just click on the respective language to go into the translation editor. So some things which I want to highlight as which linguists can do whilst working in the editor. They can customize their own view of the editor. So for example, they can enable dark mode if they prefer working like that. They can also reorder this context sidebar, which you see here, right? So they can basically display the information as in the order in which they want to see. So in case they want to see the references towards the top, they can customize that by moving it upwards. If they want to move activity perhaps a bit down, they have the ability to do that as well. And that once that's done, they can see that this contextual sidebar here, right, is basically ordering the various aspects here just in terms of the preferences that the linguist has specified. Now we can also enable a multilingual view as well. So translators can actually see how, once the translations are completed, how they view across the different languages. And this might be useful for languages which are quite similar in terms of their language to ensure consistency across during the translation process. And what they would do then is go through the process of translating. They can make use of any translation memory matches which are coming from the platform, or make use of machine translation as well as a productivity resource for them as they do their work. So you can see here that we've got some suggestions coming from machine translation, from DeepL in this case, for German and French. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to do another batch action, which is then free translating all of this content across both languages. An asynchronous action, so this is taking a little moment just to refresh, but once that's done, you'll just see that you'll be able to refresh your page, and now you can see, right, that we've got the machine translations which have been inserted in most cases here. If we then look at, for example, a key at this particular icon here, you'll basically be able to see whether machine translation has been used or not, and which machine translation system has been used for the translation of that particular key. So this is all hopefully providing linguists with a very useful tool set in terms of the contextual information that they're able to see. They can also see them items relevant for the job. So for example, all the details which I entered as part of this job template, right? So the briefing, the due date, this is all visible. So translators don't necessarily have to leave the editor environment to see as much information which is relevant for their work as possible. So now the translations have been done. If I now go back to the project interface, what I can do as a linguist is then mark my job as completed. This then sends a notification to the project owner that they know that the project has now been completed, and so they can proceed with the next part, right, of the process, which would typically be downloading the content in the file format that they want. Now, even though the upload format was a simple JSON file, I have the flexibility to download the content, for example, as an iOS strings file. So you're not necessarily wedded, right, to the file format that you've uploaded to the project. You can still then, download the file, the content in whichever file format that you need. Now, for projects where you're managing iOS and Android translations in one project, this is a very useful functionality because you can download an iOS strings file, or in the case of Android, you have the Android XML file format here as well. You can just download this file just to create the round trip. And what we'll do is just open this file in Visual Studio Code. So you can see now that we've got this content in the Android XML format, right, with the key structure as you would expect, and along with the values for translation. So that was really the first part of the product that I wanted to show you in terms of project creation and how linguists interact with the platform. The second thing I want to highlight then are the integrations that we have in place with phrase strings. And in particular, I want to focus on the Figma integration. So here you can see that I've got a project set up already with some locales which are defined. I have no keys in this project at this point in time. But what I want to do now as a UX designer, for example, is I want to push my translatable content from a Figma design into a phrase strings project, and also to provide the visual context to the translators, also upload the screenshots as well to that particular project. So I can do this. I'm going to select all my content here. I'm going to run the plugin, which is phrase strings. Now, see, what's happening right now is that the content is being visualized, and the key names are actually taken from the labels of the text layers that I've provided here. You have the ability then to modify the key names by the plugin if you want to do that. It's very useful if you're able to agree on a key naming structure, right? Even during the design process. Might not always be the case, but you do have the flexibility then to be able to modify the key names a bit later. What we want to do now is push this content and the screenshots, as you can see here, into this project, the Figma integration product tour project. So I'll just click on it now. And as you can see, you're kept up to date with the progress of the push. And once that's done, you can then either via the plugin itself, open the content directly in the phrase strings interface. So now go back to my project. You can see now that we've got some keys that have been incorporated into the platform. What I did in my project settings in this case was actually enable this parameter that all new keys which are imported will be automatically pre-translated, which wasn't the setting that I enabled in the first project scenario. So we can see, right, that all the content has been translated already. We then navigate into the editor. You can see here that we've got our translations, which are coming from, in this case, I would assume, from machine translation, from translation memory in this case. The screenshots, of course, per key are associated with the relevant keys, which are being localized. And of course, I pre-translated everything already, but, a linguist would then go through the process of performing the translations. Once they're done, and, the UX designer is informed of the fact that the translations have been completed, they can then, let me make this a bit smaller. They can then pull the translations directly into their Figma project. Again, we pull up the plugin here. And you can see here that we've got this tab for pull translations to Figma. Here, I'm going to select my language, German. See that the German translations are being visualized here in the plugin. And then if we click on continue, we have the option here for creating a new page with translated content or overriding the existing design with the translations. I think in most cases, you want to create a new page with the translated content. As you can see here, we now have our German translations, which are being, been imported again into the Figma project. And so I can, as a UX designer, I can then perform some validation testing, right? In case there, for example, some issues with text overspill, or truncation or things like that, and make necessary adjustments then for this particular design. So that covers the Figma integration. And the next thing I want to show, which is another very useful way of providing context to translators, is the in-context editor. So here I've got a particular website here. You can see here that we've got some information also relevant for the in-context editor, which can be integrated within almost any web application, and it gives linguists then the option to be able to visualize their translations directly in the website or web application here. So if we then, you can see that we've got these pencil icons. And if we click on the key, you can see now that the translation editor has been, is now popping up here at the bottom. We can define our target languages, our target language that we want to then, complete the translations. Now, our in-context editor has gone through a bit of an overhaul in recent times, and we've added now some functionalities which are very useful in terms of incorporating a lot of the contextual information that you see when working in the translation editor. So here, for example, linguists can make use of machine translation memory matches. They see all this data. any descriptions which have been added, right, to the keys, that they can see those here. Any job-related information in case these keys were part of a particular translation jobs, they can see here. This was all information that wasn't present in the previous incarnation of the in-context editor. So this is now a very useful functionality that linguists can make use of all the resources that they have whilst working in the translation editor, but in this in-context environment here. And if we then make some changes, for example, I'll just pull this down. You can see that the translations, that the translated content that I'm adding, right, is now being visualized directly in the web application itself. So this, again, is something that's really, really useful for web-based applications. You can configure the in-context editor and allow translators to make use of the functionalities of the phrase strings editor, whilst also visualizing the translations in the web application directly itself. So that was then the section related to the in-context editor. And the final thing, which I wanted to show you as part of this demo, is our over-the-air feature. So I'm just going to go back to my projects and back to my demo space. And you can see here that I've got a project, right, for over-the-air, which contain some keys, which are part of a mobile application for Android. I'm just going to pull up my emulator here so you can see that this is the actual sort of dummy application that we're using for this demo. The keys you can see, right? The content is, as you can see here, OTA, from phrase, and hello world. What I'm now going to do is actually make just a change to this value. Oops, I did a spelling mistake. Let's save it now. And now what I can do is navigate over the air. And so from this section, this is the area from where I can create so-called distributions, which will essentially distribute my translations over the air. So this is the one that we're taking a look at the moment. In this distribution, I have these credentials, which you can see here, which I then use in the SDK to access my translations, and then I can create releases. So creating a release, which I'm going to do now, creates a snapshot of the current state of the project. I can provide some additional information about the release, for example, in the description field. I can then also specify, right, whether I want the over-the-air changes to be pushed to all locales or maybe just a selection of them. And I can also specify the minimum version or maximum version of the app to which I want to have these changes pushed. So I'm just going to save. And if I click on refresh, you can see that it now has this green dot next to it, which means that it is active. By default, new releases will be available in the development. So that's the environment you access with the development secret here. If you then publish the release, which you can do here, they will be available in the production environment. So the environment you access with the production secret. The idea, of course, being that you can test out new releases before you make them available to your production environment. So let's go back to the app. I need to just close the app. Let's open it again. Now, at this point, just relaunching the app will download the translation. So I need to close it again. Oops. And now you can see, right, that the translation value change that I made has now been downloaded onto the end user's device, and they can basically have access to the updated content. So basically I've updated the translation in the app without touching any of the source code. The translation came in over the air, completely eliminating the need to release a new version of the app to update the translations. So that was the key parts that I wanted to show you with the phrase product tour. One thing I do want to mention as well, because this is an excitement that will be coming in a few weeks, we'll also be releasing OTA for web-based applications in the coming weeks. At the moment, it's just for certain mobile applications. So we have SDKs for iOS, Android, Flutter, and React Native, but very soon we'll have OTA available as well for web-based applications, which we're very excited about. And so at this point, I'm just going to stop sharing, and then we can now open the floor for some questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Deepan, for the excellent demo. Before we dive into the questions, let me mention some more webinars to our audience, actually. So if you're interested in our other product, the Phrase TMS, we did a similar session to today's session just yesterday, and you can already find the recording on our webpage, so you can watch it on demand if you're interested. And then in 2 weeks, we will be doing another webinar, a look at Phrase's new connectivity capabilities, which will be focused on our recent release of innovations. And especially, we will be looking at the enhancements that we've done to the Phrase suite, which is a unified suite where you can leverage the best of both of our key pillars, the Phrase TMS and Phrase strings. So come check all this at our webinar on June the 7th. If you're interested, you can go to phrase.com/resources/webinars and watch our on-demand material or register for the upcoming one. And now let's have a look at the questions, starting with the first one. Will the recording be shared afterwards? Yes, we will be distributing the recording to you tomorrow, so you can find it in the inbox of the email address you used for registering. Next one, can I test new translation releases via over-the-air before actually deploying them to users into production?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was something that I focused on a bit, right? Just when we were going through the over-the-air demo, that you have development and production secrets. So the development secret then is really intended, right, for you to be able to test new releases from over the air before you deploy them into production.
Okay, thank you. Do you have over-the-air available for Web 2? I think this is something you mentioned that is upcoming.
Exactly. It's coming in a few weeks, so please bear with us. We're very excited by this new functionality. So it's coming up in a few weeks. So yeah, bear with us.
Amazing, thank you. Can Phrase strings integrate with Webflow website builder?
That's not something I can answer off the top of my head, unfortunately. We'll need to just check with our sort of engineering teams about that, and we can get back to you after the session if that's all right.
Okay, thank you. What frameworks are supported for the in-context editor?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. You might have seen this actually when I was looking at the demo application, but we support at this point in time, right, Ruby on Rails, Angular, Django, Spring Framework, React, Vue.js, and Symfony.
All right, thank you. How can I start receiving emails about your webinars? Let me actually paste a newsletter sign-up page, and that's probably the best way. Or you can just simply here and there look at our resources page at phrase.com/resources/webinars. Or you can also follow us on LinkedIn, where we also publish the upcoming stuff. Are the plugins needed for the integrations offered at additional cost?
Well, that's a good question. That's not something I can actually answer. This is typically a query, right? That's handled by sales colleagues. Let's look up this information on your behalf and then get back to you on that.
All right. So that looks like we are done with questions. Let me just quickly paste the link to the newsletter sign up in the chat before we close this session. There you go. All right, so Deepan, thank you very much for the presentation and for answering all the questions. And to our audience, there will be a short survey popping up when we close this session. So if you want to let us know your feedback or some suggestions for future webinars, please let us know. We really appreciate your feedback and hopefully see you at some other webinar shortly. Thank you and have a good day. Bye-bye.